All right. Well, shall we dive in here? All right, awesome. So we're very lucky today to have Bill with us. Ken and I both have the pleasure of building one of our colleagues at Ziverge, as well as he's been a contributor to the Zio ecosystem, and in particular, leading up to the launch of Zio 2, he took a lot of ownership of um, taking some things in Zio test to the next level. And so part of that was the streaming reporting of tests, which I like. But I think at one point I got into a little bit of trouble with Bill. And I mentioned that. I did not mention the other thing, which will be our topic for today, which is functionality support, sharing layers between different specs. So in Zio 1, if you had like one test file that had all your specs in it, it was very easy to do. You could do provide layer if you want to provide a separate copy of layer to everything. But if you had something that was expensive, like a Kafka service, you use provide layer shared and you'd provide it to everything in that file. But when you had multiple files that like all needed the Kafka service, there wasn't as nice of a way to do it in Zio 1. I'm not sure if Bill's going to go over kind of Zio 1 way, but you kind of had to do this what we call like the master spec thing, where you basically you could treat each spec as a value and you have some other file that just included all of your original ones and you ran those, but it wasn't really ideal because you had to like keep these two things in sync and then you'd like run that one, but you wouldn't just run everything. So a lot of work went into changing that for Zio 2, but the way you do is a little bit different and it's a new thing. So I think some people like they want to solve the problem, but they don't necessarily know how. So we thought this was the perfect time to bring in the man himself to walk us through it.
Pull up my screen here and we'll work on some code. Is that looking all right?
Oh yeah, nice.
Just
Nice. Perfect.
Empty right now. Yeah, so we're gonna build up to sharing layers across different spec files. We're just gonna, start from the simplest spec and then, kind of go piece by piece till we get to the final destination here. All right, so we'll start with just a very basic test, which is not going to do very much. All right. We'll just make sure that works.
Hello, spec.
Yeah.
All right, we've put it high, and that completes. Great. But now let's work on providing some services to this test. And we'll create something that's called cheap service. And for our purposes, we're going to want to keep track of how often it's been called.
Oh, Bill, close the project sidebar. I'm not sure if we'll need to switch.
Yeah, that'll give us a little bit more space.
Yeah.
And maybe make it a little bit larger for people just who maybe are on smaller screens.
You can also use the trackpad to sort of unpinch in. I don't know the word for it, spread. That sounds weird, but there we go.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, so you're going to make a call method here. And what is that going to do? It is going to keep track of the count of how many times this service has been called. And we're going to track that with a ref. And so anytime it's called, we just want to do a counter update and add 1 to it. And then we're also going to make our accessor, so it's just a little easier to call in our tests. I'm just going to go ahead and import everything in Zio because it'll be a nuisance otherwise. Okay, so cheap service. All right, so this is the thing that we're going to want to use in our tests. And thanks for giving explicit types as I go. Even better than IntelliJ. All right. So let's go ahead and write a test that will use this. And expand this a bit. And then it will yield our assert completes. So if we attempt to run this now, it's not going to work. And actually, just so I don't have to keep updating the name of this, we'll just call it demo spec and keep iterating on that. Okay, so it's saying we need to provide a cheap service, which we have not done. So we will go ahead and make one of those. Okay, and to do this, so for our purposes, we're going to want something that is scoped. And okay, so to construct a cheap service, we're going to need a ref. So we can go ahead and start by making that starting at 0. And then we want to get our actual layer. And for our purposes, it's going to be nice to see some output whenever it is created and destroyed at the end. So we will do a acquire release. And so when we are first creating this service, it's pretty straightforward. We're just going to call cheap service, give it our counter, and do I need to? Oh yeah, it's got to be a video. And if I'm forgetting any, more terse ways of doing this, just let me know. Okay, and then we'll say now we're in our release. This is what we're going to do whenever we're done with this layer. So I'm going to want to import some logging methods that we have. It's going to give us friendly log messages. Okay, so we're going to log service. We'll expand this in a little bit. Okay.
So there is actually, I'm not sure, there is actually one slightly maybe terser way, since you mentioned of doing this. What you can do is just say, for instance, so service, right? I call it that. We could just, oh, oops, I have multiple cursors. No, something that's terrible has happened to me. What's it going on? Am I deleting it? Oh, I do not want multiple cursors. Why do I still have? I cannot get rid of my multiple cursors. Let me try again. Do I have one cursor? One cursor. One cursor. I love it. All right. What we could do is something like this as well. So you could just say, service is equal to cheap service, and then you could say, and maybe Adam might have an even better way, but you could just say zo.add finalizer, right?
Yep, that's exactly what I was gonna suggest. If you're actually doing some allocation where you need to make sure that like the two happen uninterruptedly, then like the acquire release one is like a little bit better, but for this demonstration, this was perfect.
Okay, and we are going to want some logging in our creation too.
Yeah, so you might just do something.
Let me just do it
here.
Right here. Yeah,
yeah,
great.
You just do log. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so that looks good now.
Get all of our inner OCD out.
Yeah. Okay, great. So we will plug that in. And we'll start with just doing it right here. Cheap service live, and give that another whirl. It's clashing with where I already created this ahead of time. So we'll just delete that. I think that it's called okay, so the name sorted out. Okay, so now we have executed here. Let's see, we are add finalizer. So that is not what I was expecting. So
sorry, what are you looking for?
So we're only seeing the constructing message twice here. We're not seeing the release message.
Oh, where's the constructing come from? Because we're not even saying constructing, we're saying creating. Is this like some legacy from something else?
Oh yeah, I think this maybe is the
probably. Let me go back over here and just delete that.
Are we running the right test? Is this called demo?
Demo spec.
Want to put this in like another package or something, or give it another name?
I want to reuse some of those other layers though. So let me just
let's call this like live demo spec or something, and then we could prefix everything with the word live just to differentiate, or some other word like Minerve Mots.
Okay, that will be
not that way.
Sure.
Shall we leave you alone and let you do your
service.
thing?
Yeah, might have a few too many hands in the pot here. Okay, so I am just going to delete some of these pre-existing tests because we're going to recreate them as we go. All that. Should have a few less conflicts going on here. Okay, so we're still saying constructing service when it should be creating service demo tools. Yeah, that's because I am ignoring the message in my log messages.
Okay, so there we go. So it's probably running.
There we go.
Okay. There we go. Yay!
All right, we're back on track.
Yay, logging framework. Okay.
Yeah. So we will go ahead and make a suite out of this. Suite, doesn't matter what the name is. And we will make a few tests. And A, and this is B, and we'll run this again. And now we should see that we're going to make 2 services and then release 2 services. Okay, great. And let's go ahead and update this to actually get our final count.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Oh boy.
I'm not going to.
You're being a little too helpful here.
Yeah, ideas state has just jumps my cursor randomly, so I will not type anymore. Man, they really got to solve that.
Okay, cool. So now we can see that, all right, we've created 2 services. They were each called one time, and then we threw them away.
Oh, whoa, big problem. That pluralization is all off. Look at that. We should write a pluralization library real quick.
Yeah, we're just going to ignore that.
What cheeky name we'll come up with for that?
Yeah. Okay, so you can see in our spec, this is explicitly providing it to each of our tests. but pretty quickly you're going to realize that's annoying. You don't want to do that. So we will take it off the test level and we will give it to our entire suite. And we should see the exact same behavior here. It's going to create one, use it a single time, throw it away. Okay. And that is fine for either just really cheap services or services where you need the isolation. You don't want multiple tests interacting with the same service for whatever your purposes are. And
I think that is the point that's like good to emphasize, because I think some people have the like they kind of think like, oh, if more efficient is better, like why don't we just like share everything? And like actually it can make your tests like a lot more brittle sometimes, because if you like have some like cache or something and you put something in one test and then the other time you're like testing if the cache is empty or something, like just changing the order of your tests or like the order they get executed can like change them. So like if you don't need the efficiency, like it's actually probably better to provide separate ones to each of your tests.
Yeah, and by default, the ordering is indeterminate for our tests because we're trying to run them in parallel as much as possible. So even if you're not cut and pasting your code, the order will change just kind of arbitrarily behind the scenes.
Yeah, and there's a sequential test aspect you can use if you need to have a specific ordering, but yes, that's not the default.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to bring in the concept of an average service. This one's going to be a bit more heavyweight. And we're going to call that in both of. And I will say I have an average service that is functionally identical to cheap service. The implementation is a case class around a counter, and we made a layer that reports its construction and
there's this like sleep though in this one.
Yeah, I think there is a small sleep in the construction of this one just to indicate that it's a little heavier. Yeah, so it'll sleep for 2 seconds.
Cool.
Okay, so we'll try to run this again and it won't work because we need to give it an average service. And we will do that. Oh, actually, these are laid out a little differently here. So we can do this, and that it works, but now you can see we've made our average service twice. And since this one's a little heavier weight, we really don't want to do that. We'd really just like to provide it a single time. And so you can say that you want to provide shared right here. And, that will, in some cases be the correct thing you want to do of, okay, now we're constructing both the cheap and the average service a single time. They're each being called twice and then released. But as we mentioned, our cheap service might also be brittle, stateful, what have you. So we want to actually keep it being provided to each test individually and only have the average service be shared. So we are going to split this up a little bit. And so first we're going to do provide some with our cheap service.
Ooh, and can you run that as is to see the error message?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Not sure if everyone knows about this feature. I think I mentioned it recently.
Yeah. So what we are attempting to do here is provide a cheap service to every single test individually, and then just provide one average service across the entire suite. But we're missing a little bit of information here.
Oh, no. I think maybe comment out provide shared first.
Oh, okay. Right. And now we should get the
I need a better error for that though. Note to self.
Error message. Yeah. So you can see, oh, you didn't give it an average service. Maybe we should provide one right there, but we don't want to do that because that's what we did a moment ago. Instead, what we want to do is just give the type parameter here, which is going to be the remainder of the types that we need from the environment. So if we plug that in right here, and we don't actually need to qualify it here. But yeah, so now it's still saying, oh, you need an average service before we can run this. So that's when we get our provide shared. And now we execute that, making one average service, two cheap services that are each used a single time. And then we see average service was used twice. Cool. Okay. So now we are at a point where in some ways we've kind of capped out what we can do with a single file. We can share stuff across tests and suites, and however nested your suites are, that's fine. You could have more intermediate levels here, where you've got more suites, and around all of them, but there's not going to be any real functional differences. They're all kind of using the same tricks, and since all of our specs are just built out of other nested specs, the behavior is very regular. Kit is resisting the urge to actually type this in, but I'm not going to go down that road right now. Yeah, just make sure that that's working. Okay, so now let's say that our tests are even more complex and need to do some more stuff here. So we're gonna bump it up to expensive service call. And I call that in each of these. And this is, we can start in the same way that we did before. So this should execute by, oh, I need to indicate, yep. This one kind of funny. That'll work. We'll see our expensive service. It's in red to indicate you really don't want to be doing this more than you absolutely need to. And I am using the Zio logging functionality for this, which is it's nice for production purposes, but it's also great for demos where you just want colored text to indicate some different things. And okay, so in Zio 1, that was about as far as you could take this. And now let's say that we have two completely distinct spec files. And in a real code base, these would be in separate files, packages, scattered all across your project. But for the purposes of this demo, we'll have them in the same file. And now when we run this, we're just going to do a demo spec star so that we execute both of them. And now we can see our expensive service is constructed twice, and it's only called 2 times, the same as our average service. But really, this is something across our entire code base, we only want to spin this thing up once. Maybe it's some heavy Docker containers, test containers, using Scott's library, whatever your Kafka system is, you know best what the expensive thing is that you only want to construct a single time. So if we want to ensure that this only happens once, we are going to have to move away from ZioSpec default, because with ZioSpec default, you are only allowed to depend on the test environment, which is kind of our built-in features that we give you. You get your test console, test clock, all that good stuff. But it doesn't allow for any domain-specific types to be required by your spec class. So we are going to take ZeoSpec. That's actually what we need to use here. And I'm going to go ahead and delete the duplicate one, and we can copy paste it again once we're done with these changes. And we're going to say, all right, our ZeoSpec, however we define our spec logic in here, it is still going to need an expensive service at the end of all that. And the way that you indicate which layer should be used by your spec file is our bootstrap field. And it's
I did it, Bill. I edited the file without breaking everything somehow.
well done. You're developing a lighter touch.
Thank you.
Okay, so now here, if we, well, let's say we give the wrong value here to start off with, just so we show people what kind of error messages you might see. It's going to say, hey, you still haven't given us an expensive service, and this bootstrap field has the wrong type. We found an average service up there, but based on the ZeoSpec type parameter, you actually need to be giving us an expensive service. And so we will do that. And you can see in our provide shared here, we actually don't have to do provide some shared. And actually, let me double check that. Let's go ahead and run this again. Actually, do we need to do provide some shared? Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so that will leave the, oh, but it actually infers it there. So that part, it's actually a little more helpful.
That's weird.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, because when we were just working all within the spec, we have to say what the leftover is. But I guess since we've provided the type explicitly up here, that is able to be leveraged down here.
Yeah, because it knows what the target is.
Yeah,
Maybe.
so it's, yeah, it's able to connect those dots. I don't know the details of what the compiler is doing there.
Yes.
Yeah, it is just a little easier. And now we can see, oh, and actually, for the purposes of this demo, I need to add a little test aspect afterwards here. And demos, report expensive layers. So we should see how many times our expensive layer is called here. Okay, so now we can see it was called 2 times as well, and that's expected. We just have 2 tests here. But now we actually want to finally jump the gap of sharing between completely separate spec files. And they have really no relation to each other than they have the same type parameter to ZeoSpec. They don't have to extend the same superclass or anything, or live in the same package. They're just completely freestanding. And we can call this sweet and for those purposes. And at long last, we should get to our single heavyweight layer. Oh, and I'm reporting it twice, as I'm reporting it in each test right now. So we can run that again real fast and just see the single time. And then we can kind of dissect this and see that, okay, cheap services each called 1 time. Average service was called twice. chip service after 0 calls. Am I creating an additional one somewhere where I shouldn't be? Yeah, so this all looks good. I am constructing.
Oh, what's that here? Sorry.
There's just one more cheap service creation and release.
I like relation.
Relation. Yes, I'm.
Where would that be? Because we're calling it everywhere, huh?
Yeah. That's not using it anywhere. Okay, that's a little mysterious. This wasn't showing up in my my practice run, so I assume I've just.
We may be creating a nested suite somewhere that requires it, which is why it's never getting called. Because sometimes the suite can require resources as well.
Oh, true. The suite might be. You definitely had a nested suite before, right?
Right, but we have a multiple case of suites, and we have basically like a scoped case, which requires an environment. And we may be creating an intermediate one with all these intermediate provides.
Sure.
Okay.
It's not really a problem since we said it's a cheap service. Otherwise, we would be sharing it.
I guess it's not the most significant point of this, but would be nice to not have anything extra showing up. But we'll get too caught up on it if we are.
Yeah, but to expand a little bit on what Adam was saying, these suites themselves can actually have ZO effects inside of them, and you can have like a for comprehension inside of a suite, which returns a ZO of a test or a ZO of another suite, and you might require resources there. So they will acquire and release resources per suite as well, potentially. Hey, you fixed it? You did.
Yeah, so I put the provide before the test aspect where we're reporting the expensive layer.
Gotcha.
And,
yep.
Yeah. Okay, so now we can see that the expensive layer or expensive service is only constructed once, and it doesn't matter, how many separate files we have. And I guess I can go ahead and, dump another one in a separate file just to be sure. Throw all that in there, call it spec C. Let's see. Even more output, and we should end up with, I guess, 6 calls to our expensive service. Yep. Oh, and I have a little output there. But yeah, so I think that pretty much covers what I wanted to show here. And I think most of the complexity in different users' cases are just going to be very domain dependent. You choose exactly what layer you want, isolated separate instances, and where you want, just maximal sharing. And yeah, this can end up having a pretty significant impact on just how long it takes your test to run. If nothing else, I think that's the most basic case of if something takes several seconds to start up, ideally, kids having fun there. Yeah, ideally you're only going to do that once. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I want to show here, unless, admin kit, you can think of like some tweak we should show.
So how can we share layers across projects, across totally?
How about between different machines? You solved that problem, right?
I had enough trouble fighting with SBT to get this all working, but SBT plus different operating systems and machines, I I shudder to think what would be required there.
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, well, I think Daniel has one question, which is interesting, which maybe we'll come back to in a second. But I think overall, I think biggest takeaway from it is it's pretty straightforward, but it's a slightly different pattern, right? I think most of the other things we do, we're used to kind of just like calling dot and then having some operator, right? Dot provide some, dot provide some shared, dot provide. And this we do a little bit differently just because we have to have some way to kind of, I mean, because these are in different files, like there's no one thing that we can call dot XYZ on. So we have this pattern that's a little bit more of a object-oriented pattern, you could say, where we extend this thing and we implement this thing. So I think it works really nicely when you do it, but it's just a little bit different. So I think it's really helpful to have a session like this to kind of see this once.
Yeah. And behind the scenes, what this is going to be doing is as SBT discovers all of your spec classes and your bootstraps, it's going to take each of those and combine them and make them available in the runtime. And that's where all the deduplication happens. And we make sure that only a single instance of any of these things is created across your entire SBT command that you're invoking.
And so I think in a real code base, potentially something that you'd want to do is sort of create your own base, spec that does this thing. So if you have, your Postgres integration spec, right? And then maybe you'd use ZO test containers or something, and you would you'd only want to have one container created for your entire, everything that involves whatever Postgres testing. So you would a trait that extends ZO spec of whatever you call that, and extend from that. So you don't have to list these bootstraps everywhere. That could just be done in you make your own, ZO spec test containers, etc.
And maybe you have it one super type per package, or whatever boundaries make sense.
Since we have some extra time, could we actually show that really quickly, just for making a ZO spec expensive or something, how that kind of abstraction would work?
Sure.
Yeah. Sorry to force more.
Oh, great.
And I think it could be a trait as well. I could be wrong.
All right.
The Vim mastery. Cool.
Vim user, anyways. Okay, so we haven't updated all the files, but we'll just make sure that still runs. Look like it. Yeah. So now we can hop back here. All right, so now we've got.
Delete those bootstraps, and then you're good.
Oh yeah, there we are. We're writing now. Okay. Yeah. So this might more closely mirror what you would be doing in your code base.
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, and there's a question from Daniel. I don't have.
I can kind of hit on it. So Daniel basically asks, what if we have these two different suites that both require whatever an expensive spec or expensive service, sorry. But we have two different layers that we provide as the bootstrap layers to each of them. And one does an expensive service that prints expensive service A, and the other is an expensive service that prints expensive service B. And I think the first answer is probably don't do that, but let's see what happens, and maybe even improvements we can make that.
I'm not sure I entirely parse that. Maybe you should kind of type out.
Sure.
The goal here.
So create two different layers that implement two different implementations of expensive service. And then in demo spec A, val type right, bootstrap equals expensive service layer 1. And in demo spec B, val bootstrap equals expensive service layer 2. Oh
man. Doesn't that
okay?
Yeah, so do not do this at home, but it is it is a good little exercise, and we can see how this is handled. And I mean, we may be able to improve this, but this is part of why we have Zymposium.
And so you're saying here, instead of a case class final here, like turning this into a trait and then having two implementations of it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Or even, I think we could actually use the same implementation. We just need eventually a different layer that creates it. So we could, that would
we just have 2 layers. That's right.
Yeah, let's go back to the demo spec and we could just change it here. So just change that. Oops, where's my doodler? Where's my doodle device? No, not that. There we go. Oh yeah. So change this to ZeoSpec of expensive service again, and then make a new bootstrap layer, and then just do zlayer.succeed or something, or zlayer. Do zlayer, and then not succeed. I'm sorry. We want from Zeo, or just use the curly braces. And then in there say zeo.debug. Or or log or what have you, print, other service or something. Okay.
Well, and I think there are kind of 2 things that'll be interesting for us to see here. So one is, in general, the way ZLayer works is it uses the reference identity of the layers to determine whether 2 layers are the same layer, because there's really no other way to kind of look at these things and say whether they're the same or not. So one thing is we're just going to have 2 layers, so we're going to construct 2 layers, and we'll probably see, I think we'll see the debug messages printed for those. I think the second thing that'll be interesting for us to look at and may require us to do a little bit of a different implementation is, so we create these 2 different layers, does each test get their respective layers, or is there something that more complicated that goes on there?
Expensive service.
That might be more distracting than actually typing.
Just instantiate in the yield in the question mark. Now instantiate the expensive service, because we just need to return it from this effect.
Yeah, sorry, 1 second. I need to plug in my keyboard apparently.
I need to work on my Zoom penmanship. I'm sorry.
Yeah, my keyboard is.
Ooh, got a lot of semicolons in there now.
Shouldn't have any of this.
Yeah, just down there for the question marks, and then I guess just import your log.
Oh yeah.
Okay, cool. So now we have theoretically 2 different layers, and I'm guessing it's just going to use one of these. So it's a little non-deterministic, probably, which one it's going to find, or it'll do something horrible where it uses both. But this is sort of, I guess, the chaotic case that Vega was talking about, where you have 1 type, but 2.
So we can leave the other one as is, because
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we all need 2 different ones.
But yeah, we'll either see other service. Okay, so it made both, and it's going to be hard to tell which one's actually being used internally. I think in that case, clearly not both are. One, okay, looks like that one. Okay, so it looks like arbitrarily this one, and I'm guessing, I don't think that'll work though.
So sorry, how many calls did other service get if we go up there?
6.
Well, wait, expensive service got 6. What about the other one?
We haven't seen that, so we need to.
I don't think that'll work though, Bill.
Oh,
because yeah. Well, we could try it, but I think it might. Let's see. So
yeah, I think we've got a little bit of opportunities for improvement here, which is why symposiums like this are great.
keep us honest. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, these shared services, I think by making that spec, that's probably the safest thing to do. And I guess just delete. There we go. Cool.
Okay, so we should see.
I think you're going to have to do zlayer.scoped though. Because the finalizer adds the scope, and also on flat map in order to get the actual. Or no, sorry, you don't have to flat map, but delete. I think you're referring to ref at the end of that line.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I will need.
No, it's gonna print it out. Just
yeah.
Well, it might not print it out, but that's for the other reason.
Yeah. Okay. So we see other services made.
Yeah. So I didn't think. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly, but definitely don't do that at home. I think what we could do, we don't have sick minds like Vigo, but we should help the Vigos of the world who try to use this in terrifying ways.
Well, or ideally make sure it just does the most intuitive thing. But yeah, some combination of that, and we could try to create some kind of warning. So yeah, that's a good thought.
Who else would like us to destroy more? No, there's some other questions. I think Nabil had a question. Do you need a new base spec for every set of expensive services, or even if they are overlapping? So maybe test A needs Kafka, test B needs Postgres, test C needs Kafka and Postgres. Does this mean I need 3 base specs? I think as long as you're using the same actual layer definition, it'll be okay, because layers have sort of value identity. But I don't know, does that question make sense, Bill and Ed?
Yeah, I mean, I think practically what I think I would suggest in most cases is just at least for a significant part of your application, you find you're using some combinations of services A, B, and C, just kind of make your like ABC spec a little bit like we showed the example of kind of making your like demo spec that you could extend, and just have that output a shared layer that does A, B, and C. And then you've kind of got that, and that kind of takes care of you for like everything you're doing in that part of your program.
All right, plus, baby.
Yeah. I guess maybe it would be better to.
Oh, it's zlayer.make, but that's totally fine. This is simple enough where I think that is totally acceptable. I wonder, this might go also infer it. I'd be curious about that, because you do have the type annotation above. So. And then I think import zlayer.
Yeah.
Nice, cool. Never mind.
Oh, no, we need to.
Yeah, because of macros, you do.
Yeah,
that's kind of the problem with macros.
When you dabble in dark arts.
Exactly. Yeah, it gets typed before whatever.
Yeah.
Typed at the wrong time.
And cool. Yeah, so you could just make as many variations of this as you need. Yeah. I think that addresses that question. You know, if that.
I think so. I mean, we can always follow up offline if we need to.
Cool. Let's see. All right. I think that's all the questions.
Yeah, I think we are good, and yeah, we're slightly under an hour, but it's also evening or an afternoon, depending on what part of the world you're in on a summer day. So I don't think there's any reason we necessarily need to go longer.
And Yeah.
Be more efficient, maybe. Just wait. Give us a couple weeks, and we'll be back in an hour and a half for one of these. But it's good to not always be there, I think.
But yeah, give this a try. It was definitely a lot of work. I think. I mean, Bill can go into the details of that, but
Yeah.
it involves.
Or I could not.
Internal. He's still scarred. The internals of SBT and trying to fuse these things together. There were a lot of experimentation. We couldn't just do things necessarily in the nice, pure, fun, functional Zio way. We had to sort of integrate with these external tools.
Yeah, the
by
first.
we, I mean Bill did.
Yeah, the first working version was very beautiful. Of all these separate Zio spec files were just composed into more Zio specs. But some of the default SBT behavior just strongly disagreed with that approach and how we reported from our tests. So we had to back away from the coolest version. And yeah, but we still have something that's pretty nice as an end user. The implementation's just uglier.
Well, once we come out with ZBT, I'm sure everything will be.
Just gotta find the right weekend for you to knock that out.
Next project, Bill. Well, thank you for joining us, Bill.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is really great.
Yeah, please come back soon.
Develop another engineering feature, and we can talk about that.
Glad to, whenever that next one comes.
All right.
Awesome.
Well, thanks for joining us, everybody, and
thank you so much to everyone.
We'll see you all next Friday. Hit us up if you want us to cover anything.